Good evening, guys. Can you hear me? Welcome to the Spiritual Speakeasy, where the bar is always open and the spirits are always served. Hi, Greg. If you can hear me, type in one. If you cannot, obviously, don't type in anything. Tonight's special guest is Frankie. I'm waiting for him to join in. There he is. Let me bring him on board. Hi, Frankie.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, shit. I can't hear you.
Uh-oh. Greg, type in one if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Can't hear you.
You can? You can or cannot? So Greg can hear me and Frankie cannot. Got some technical difficulties here. Hang on. Hang on.
Testing one.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? It says your mic is not connected.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I can hear you.
All right, good.
Okay. Good, good, good. Hey, we are batting full time here. Look at that. Frankie was on last week and we had an amazing discussion and everybody wanted more. And I actually had one guest challenge me and say, "Are you up to a discussion about Jesus?" I'm really not sure where that came from. Um, I am pretty open about my spirituality. Um, I don't talk a lot about religion except for I disagree with it. I don't like it. But you and I've had that talk.
Yeah,
It's just because of my experiences and the fact that it's man-made and man-run. Not men as in sexual men, but human race.
sorry.
And I think anytime humans get into it, we screw things up.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's an interpretation. I think that there's are we on? Are we live? We're live? Okay.
Yes.
All right, cool. Let me go to the comments then. Oh, okay, there we go. Um hello everyone. Yeah, so it's a tough subject for some people. I think that there's an overwhelming hatred toward Christ and Jesus and Christians. But I think most of that is motivated through actions of Christians, that or people that claim themselves as Christians. And I think that there's a common denominator in all of those people as well. I think that there's negative press toward Christians in general. Um, you could say that about most religions, but I think that Catholics in general are heavily targeted, um, heavily targeted, and and there's good reason for all of that. I understand spotlight. I understand that there is stuff that goes on in the church and things that we may not all agree with at all times, but you also have to understand that um, that's not coming from God, right? Like that's not coming from Christ. That's not coming from Jesus. People find their ways, evil people find their ways into um, those places, those hidden corners, whether it's,
Yes,
you
they
know,
do.
just recently there was a coach, softball coach, that was convicted. Just recently, there was other religions, denominations that were caught doing the same things, molesting children. It's anywhere that they have access to children. It's not just the church. It's anywhere these people that are very
I would
possessed.
agree with that. I would
And I
100%.
yeah, I think that the bigger story um, with that stuff is the church didn't really answer. The church didn't, they hid priests. They didn't make it right for those people that were affected by it. Whether they believed in that or not, or believe the people, believe the victims, that's another story. There are always lawsuits that ensue. I was very fortunate enough to grow up in South Florida. I attended St. Michael's, which was a Roman Catholic church. It was not a charismatic Catholic church, which people are more than not familiar with. So there's like Catholic aerobics, is what I call it. There's sit, kneel, pray, walk around, get back, stand back up, sit back down. Latin mass isn't like that. Latin mass is most of the time you're kneeling the entire time. The priest doesn't really have relation with the audience. The priest is essentially going through the motions and speaking toward the cross of Christ on the altar for the duration of it. The church is anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes long, and you get a very interesting fill of that. You're not allowed to touch the communion with your hands, so everything's placed on your tongue, and the same with the wine. It's a very different setup. It's a more holy experience. It's a more meditative experience. And when you move from that to more of a secular type charismatic Catholic church, which more people are understand that a little bit better because of the parodies, the jokes, the stuff that ensues, whether you went to a wedding or not. So I think that there's a bit of a play. Now, I've gone to non-denominational churches. I've gone to Calvinist churches, which a lot of people are not familiar with Calvinist. But Calvinists are creationists. They are people that believe we're about 65 to 7,000 years old. They believe wholly in the scripture. They believe it word for word. They are also, they mirror, and this is kind of it's not anything at all like Jehovah's Witness, but they also believe that the sins of our forefathers can prevent you from being a saved one, a salvation. And so Calvinists are very strong. They are a huge movement in Utah right now. If anybody's seen Primeval on Netflix, it tells the story of Brigham Young um, and the Mormon massacre, where they dressed up as Native Americans and slaughtered people in certain villages because they wanted to take over most of Utah. Now, I don't know if any of that is true. I did some study into it, and although that people do believe that that happened, I don't know that that actually happened. There is no actual evidence or proof that a massacre occurred where Mormons dressed up like Native Americans. But when you get into the science of Christ, you're absolutely right. When we have the Septuagint, the actual original text, the Hebrew, and that is transferred into the Greek, we have our first Bible. And that's essentially the first time we're going to hear about Christ from a biblical standpoint, from the writings that um, ensue from there on. Okay, so that's basically the beginning. But what people don't understand and don't know, and a lot of people don't take the time to read, and that's a big thing that's missing in the world in general. We're more on social media. We'd rather get our information from memes. We'd rather listen to somebody's comment. We'd rather hear the elephant game, is what I call it. They hear something from a podcast and they try to interpret that and then write that on Facebook or social media. And then from there, you have people that are now taking that saying that was said somewhere else, and now it's gone and it's stretched. Okay. And so what the original message was is lost, because now we've interpreted what the original message was, and that's where you get a lot of these things. The getting back to Calvinists, they believe strictly in Martin Luther and the work that he did.
Right, right.
Where,
You're very, very correct.
yeah, and so Martin Luther, if you're not of the Lutheran religion, was a one that basically is the first guy that we're going to see in history take the Bible, and he is going to say this needs to be for everyone. And his belief system was that the Holy Roman Church was speaking Latin and then basically oppressing the people to not learn the language, so they could not read the Bible. So they had to get the thirst of Christ, and the only way to do that was to go to church. And in order to go to church, they couldn't read, so they got the words from the Catholic priest at the time. Martin Luther didn't like that. He wanted the Bible to be available for everyone. So what he decided to do was break off, take the book, and write it for everyone. And because of Gutenberg, we had a press at that point. And the first thing that Gutenberg ever printed was the Bible. And this would get into millions and millions of people's hands. And so from that point on, we start to see the culmination of different religions over time, right? So the story of Jesus is totally lost on Mormons. That's more about Saint Michael and Saint Joseph and other things become Lord Christ. And it's a very challenging religion to understand. Mormons are Puritans. They don't believe in cursing. They don't believe in alcohol. They don't believe in dancing. It's very much like Footloose. And the Southern Baptists are the same way. And so it's all about that interpretation. Like, why do Southern Baptists not drink? Why do Mormons believe that Christ is an angel and not the Son of God? Why does so the issue ensues throughout all the Christian religions, and then you get into cults. Okay, so Wicca is a cult, Scientology is a cult,
Yes,
New
it
Age
is.
is a cult, and what I mean by cult is if you look at some of the stuff that was done. So Wicca, for instance, starts in 1862. Okay, so that's not something that was before time. That wasn't something that was there. Okay, I have some notes that I'm looking at, so I don't think I'm like having a stroke or something.
It was not an original earth-based religion.
Yeah, no one in person. It roots in 19th century. Wicca is it's from Britain. It's partly inspired by Margaret Murray. I want to say her name is Margaret Murray, is the founder of the Wiccan religion. It was organized by Gerald Gardner was his name, Gerald Gardner, and that was from like 1884 to about 1964. In the 30s and 50s, it had its roots, so more of turn of the century, more Gilded Age type of interesting. You also had a lot of spiritual movements happening at the same time. Abraham Lincoln himself was part of a spiritual movement. They were very much into mediumships and ghosts, and you're seeing some of this. This is not Wiccan, of course, but this is something that's happening at the same time. So 1862 is the beginning of the Civil War, and this is when Wicca is going to begin. Scientology begins in 1911. Okay. New Age religion, so spirituality, metaphysical, that's going to start in 1934. It's going to reign supreme in 1980 and the 1990s. She did, Barbara Spur. And that's a lot of the notes that we have. And what I'm doing is I'm going through some of basically what I have here is I'm going through everything that what we just talked about, because I knew that was going to be the subject. Did man make religion or did God, right? And so we base a lot of stuff on faith, right? So I have this, my notes are very pretty, so I can remember them. We're also going to get into Jehovah's Witness. Okay, so Jehovah's Witness is also going to emerge. Basically, what do I have there? Yes, Charles Russell is somebody that's going to create this, and he's essentially this is where we see the Watchtower publications, and this is something that if you go to local parks in St. Louis, if you go to parks anywhere in America, you'll see people sitting with stands, and they'll have pamphlets, and those pamphlets have something called the Watchtower, and that's basically the publishing of the Jehovah's Witness. So anytime you see that, then you know that this is about. So Jesus is not God in Jehovah's Witness. Okay, so if you want to go through some of these religions before we get into the actual Jesus, it's important to understand where this is coming from, and we'll go back through all of these if that's something that you want to dive into, because I think a lot of people don't understand when we say, well, it's man-made. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what man-made means. Okay, so far we've mentioned man and women creating religions. Okay, so Mormonism is going to start in 1805 by Joseph Smith Jr. This is actually going to be a huge influence, actually, in Illinois, in a town called Nauvoo. Um, there's a lovely person that actually has a property in Nauvoo. It's a haunted wedding venue, and she's actually on the property where the war ensued between Mormons and another type of community living, cultish community living, where the Mormons came and stormed them, and then they fought back and chased the Mormons off, and then later Mormons came back and destroyed them. So Mormons were very much part of those war movements where they basically came in and kind of took it crusade, maybe. I mean, but when it comes to the bringer, he believed that Utah was a calling from God. He believed that it needs to be the center of God. Heaven is touching. It's Utah, and that's where a lot of that comes in. So to understand it a little bit better, he organized what is now called the Church of Latter-day Saints. So, and it's Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that confuses a lot of people because they're putting Jesus Christ right up front. This is going to start in 1830. Are you guys starting to see the theme? Are you starting to see the theme of when these religions are being invented? So we're starting to come a culmination, and I would label all of these cults, and there's a reason why I would call them cults, which is very different from Christianity. Then we have the Unification Church. Okay, this is going to start by Sun Myung in 1920 to 2012. The Unification Church kind of fizzled out in the mid 2000s. We have Christian Science. That's Mary Baker Eddy. That's also 1821. We have Unity School of Christianity. That's 1845. So if you guys are sticking with me and you're listening to this, then you're understanding what's happening. Now, outside of Christianity, where I believe Jesus Christ died for my sins, that is what you're contending with. And if we went through all of these, this would probably have to be a part 3 to actually get to the Jesus part, because we can all talk about the carpenter's son. But the thing about Jesus that people don't like is the fact that we have missing years. We have a lot of missing years of Jesus. We know this. We know that when Jesus was young, he could profess Hebrew scripture. We know that Jesus was more sound in mind and sound in spirit than most kids at his age. We know that Jesus, as a young child, was incredible at understanding facts and where his purpose was and what he needed to do. When you look at the cults that we've mentioned, when you look at where all this stuff starts out, that's that first age of spirituality. This is when people are breaking away from it, and they're seeing the significance of their hatred toward Christianity. They're seeing their hatred toward Catholics, Baptists, Lutherans, Presbyterians, Methodists. All of those religions are soundly guided with the idea that Jesus Christ is. Yes, go ahead.
Do you think it was a sound hatred? Or do you think it was, I don't want to follow the scripted rules by the church. That doesn't suit me. So I'm going to try to find something else. And so I'm going to blame it on the church, or I'm going to say, I think so many times it's not a hatred towards the church. It's maybe a hatred towards the people in the church. It's a hatred towards the leader of the church. It's a hatred towards yourself because you're not up to the challenge.
I can have that. I can have this idea that you had a bad priest, or the priest you had was mean, or something terrible happened. But to condemn an entire religion on the acts of certain people is, in my opinion, you're not going to find that anywhere else, right? Like, the Bible is pretty clear on the idea that we all fall to sin. that the reason why Jesus is here is because we don't have to sacrifice anymore. Like he sacrificed himself for that belief in that. So we're never going to be perfect. And with those cults and with these things that came out of the 1800s, primarily in the 1800s, and we could talk about Church of England if you want. Church of England was basically devised because King Henry was tired of his wife, and the Catholic Church wouldn't divorce him because she had done nothing wrong to an annulment. So what he decides to do is create his own religion, where he could get divorced and then marry and behead. So when you look at when we say man-made religions, well, what are we actually talking about? Well, we're talking about any religion that would pivot somebody away from Christ and into their likeness, right? So they become this godlike figure when the Bible is clear, do not make kings among you, right? So what happens in, a lot of the dichotomy of religion is this argument that, well, I have gay friends and my friends are gay and they're going to go to hell based on the Bible. Nowhere in the Bible where it says gay people go to hell. I've been through it. There's 66 books, read them all. They keep referring to a verse that is talking about laying with men and women. What he's talking about is hedonism. What he's talking about is a lifestyle where you are not dedicated to the one you love. But there is no clear answer in the entire biblical sense of it. And so that's a reason why people escape the church. They believe in all this stuff. Jesus was big on love the sinner, not the sin.
Right.
But no sin is bigger than other sins, right? So sin is sin. So if you're sleeping out of wedlock with a heterosexual female and a heterosexual male, that is the same sin as two men, right? So it's not that there is this idea that, but it's recognizing to yourselves that, well, if this is the reason why I'm leaving the church, then you miss the message. And that's the church's fault. That is the people that are at the pulpit's fault. Hate is not something that resonates in Jesus's language. It's just not. He's not. What he hates is this idea that there are others after him and there are others that came before him. Jesus is a warrior. Jesus is not a hippie. Jesus is a fighter. He's a brawler, and he hangs out with the worst of the worst. This is where the emergement of the Son of God comes from. So this idea that God is peaceful, Jesus is peaceful and nice, he wasn't. He wasn't that at all. He was stern in his conviction. If you have the whole of the Roman Empire seeking you out because you have led people astray, okay, so think about Marxism. Okay, it's very easy to remain this, and this is the stuff I love online, Juli. They keep calling Trump a Marxist. He's not a Marxist. They keep calling other people Marxist. No one understands Marxism. Okay, there are two rules in Marxism. It's very simple. First, eliminate God. Eliminate him. Okay, this is what the Roman Empire did. They eliminate God. Why? Well, if you eliminate God, then you're God. There is no above us. This is empire. Caesars were considered living gods. Okay, so eliminate them, crucify them, because it takes away from it. The second thing, scripta continuum. Okay, what is scripta continuum? There were no spaces in Roman thought, which meant that in order for you to read Roman, you could never take a breath. There was never pauses between words. Scripta continuum is the idea that you had people in the center that would read aloud. You could never read to yourself. You'd be killed. Okay, they thought you were crazy. So scripta continuum was a way to understand that when you see any Roman anywhere, if you've ever been to Rome, if you've written any tablets, if you looked at anything, any kind of Roman structure, Roman books, all the words run together. There is no pause. There is no break. That's called scripta continuum. When we look at the reason why they do that is the second rule of Marxism. Control the narrative. Eliminate God, control the narrative. That's not Trump. He's not a Marxist. He's not Marxist. And I'm not making this about pro-Trump people. I have my issues with Trump as well. What I'm saying is people don't understand the science behind what they're saying online. And then somebody takes that and they basically share it. And I'm like, that's not Marxism. So we have to understand as a people, before we even get into the footsteps or walk the path of Christ, is that you have to understand everything that you're facing, everything that is against you. The minute you say or claim that you're Christian, I will guarantee you within 2 weeks' time, you will be written out of wills. You will not be talking to anyone. You will not be doing anything. anymore. The people that you put in your life will be gone. And the Bible says this: you will be hated, you will be jeered. Fear not, I am with you. Fear not, I go before you always. The thing is that is where we have the intersect, right? That's where it comes to people that we call the silent, right? The quiet, the people that are Christian at home, Christian at church, don't profess that out loud. Why? They're afraid. When you talked about ancient Rome and when you talk about Jesus's death and after Jesus, Jesus wasn't the only one crucified. Only one apostle made it. That was Peter. Okay, he's the first pope. So all the apostles are murdered ruthlessly in the book of Martyrs. I'm talking about mercilessly. Beheadings, hung upside down, broken every limb, guttural damage, disembowelment, arrows in the throat, cut the heads off. Not one of the apostles made it, but also not one of the apostles denied Christ. Why? Because they saw it. There are not many people, and the CIA will tell you this. There are not many people that can go under the test of anything that we've done, from waterboarding to electroshock therapies to veins in the systems of it, that would deny the leaders, deny the man that you're trying to fight for. In fact, in most of those incidences, people confess. We saw this with the Salem witch trials. They were under persecution. They were being tortured. And what happens? Well, you're tired of the pain. You're tired of the pain, and you're just going to admit that you're a devil worshiper, that you're possessed. And then you get to a guy by the name of Giles Corey, who believes so strongly in the Lord
Sure.
that he said, more weight. Giles Corey does this two times. And they ask him, please, dude, just profess, and we're good. But Giles Corey realized one of two things. One, that the afterlife was way better and that he believed in his God. And two, that if he admitted the fact that he was a witch, his family would no longer have property. And his family would be enslaved. He knew this. He knew that he would lose everything and his family would have nothing. So instead of professing, he says, more weight, and they crush him to death. There are certain instances in life where if you are fighting for the Holy Spirit, if you're fighting for God, if you're fighting for Christ, then I would advise you, before you even walk the footsteps of Christ, to read the Crusades, to read about John and Wadati, to read about El Cid, to read about Godfrey. And I think that when you do that, there's a heaviness that comes over you, like, oh my God, like, I don't know that I could do that. I don't know that I could run out into the middle of a field in front of Saracens and Emirs, who, nothing against the Muslim people and the Mohammedans at the time. These guys were warriors, and they were fighting for Allah the same way Christians were fighting for Christ. Okay? But there was something very different about the Christ fighters, because what we try to do when we get to the 1800s, so you understand now the man-made religions. The man-made religions are mostly cults. That's what they are. The real religions, the one that are inspired by Christ. And it's hard to talk the Crusades because we've been taught that the Crusades were terrible, that the Crusades were the things that we should never talk about. We should never look at that. Pope John Paul II apologizes for them, which I thought is the weakest statement. No, you don't apologize for the Crusades. You saved Spain. Okay? You saved Spain. And who saved Spain? Well, we go there if you're in California, right? San Fernando. Okay? The Saint Fernando, right? So Fernando the Great is the one that saved Seville from the Muslims. He does it. When you read the stories of the Crusaders, when you read the stories of the apostles, when you read the stories of the people that fought for Christ, in the end, when you read those, you have to ask yourself the question, would you die for your God? Because that's what Rome is going to do. And we're going to hear from this guy by the name of Saul, which we all know him as Paul. And he's going to write 80% of the New Testament. But who was Paul? Well, Saul was a serial killer. Okay? He was sent from the Roman Empire to kill every Christian there was. And this is where we get the fish, the symbol of the fish. So if you want to hear Christ's word, it was all in secret languages. And the ones that were caught were beheaded and killed. The ones that fought for Christ, they got on bended knee and they would not deny Christ. Why? Because of the eyewitness account of seeing somebody rise from the dead. This is the only religion in the world, in the start of our history, that has done this. Okay? They are not Christ deniers, because as much as the torture was, it was only pain to them. As much as when they took Timothy and ripped his arms off and his legs off between horses, he would not deny Christ. Why? Because he saw the resurrection. He saw him raised from the dead. He knew that it was real. So nothing in this world you could take from my men. When you have lies, when you have ideas and ideologies that are written in lies, it doesn't hold the weight. It doesn't. There are not many people in this world that if they want to be secular, take an atheist, for instance, thank God I don't believe in anything. Well, you're the most religious person I know, because for you to believe in nothing, which means you came from nothing. And we know that's not true. We know that our first words and our last words are God's name. Yeah, it's the breath, which is a beautiful speech a pastor gave. So to deny that is uncanny. For people, most people that deny Christ today are guilty of the lifestyle they're living. So they choose to ignore the idea that somebody is judging you, or the judging word is hardcore. Somebody is telling you something internal that you got to be a better person. You really do. You got to walk with Christ, and he's there for you. At this point, 4 things happen. You're ashamed. You're ashamed in this idea that if it is true, then I don't need Christ, because I don't want to face judgment. I would rather just live my life the way I'm living it and not talked about it, because now I'm guilty. And Christ eases that. Jesus eases that. He talks about that. And people are scared of that idea. But when you read about crusaders, there's a great book by Ibrahim. He wrote, the name is, I think his name is, I want to say it's James Ibrahim or Frank Ibrahim. He wrote a book called Defenders of the West. The book's about this big. Okay. Defenders of the West is a book that he knew he was going to get criticism for, because he took on the Crusades. When you take on the Crusades, it's one of the most controversial things you can do. The Crusades teach us, the Defenders of the West, the book teaches us both sides of the story. It teaches us the Muslim side, and it teaches us the Christian side. It teaches us that both Muslims and Christians had respect for each other because of how hard they fought. That at some point, the war that ensued was incredible enough for them to gain respect from each other. When you get into Vlad, who is also a crusader, when you get into John Umandati, who's probably my favorite crusader, he's the White Knight. When you look at the story of Godfrey, which is the first crusade, at the same time, El Cid is raging a crusade in Spain. These 2 warriors are incredible. And to read it just from the Christian side, you would think, okay, well, they embellished. But then you read it from the Muslim side, and they didn't lie. When Godfrey came on the battlefield, when El Cid came on the battlefield, they were outnumbered 10-1. They were starving. They had not eaten. They were eating their shoes. They were literally fighting barefoot. All they had was the bread of God, which was their spirit and faith. And in both those instances, they drove the Muslims. So much so that Godfrey takes Jerusalem. And they do this in underwhelming numbers, to a point where most Muslims that day converted to Christianity, which is why we have Christians in the Middle East, which is why we have Christians in Ethiopia. The strongholds of Christianity stayed true to themselves because they saw and witnessed the same things that the apostles witnessed, is this idea that if God is behind you and you're pure of heart, you cannot lose. And so Godfrey would ride out into the middle, and all his men would follow him. It is not like the story of Braveheart. This trumps Braveheart. You're talking about a man that's going up against 20 people and winning. It doesn't happen if you don't have something behind you. So this idea that like the Christ is, somebody said energy. No, I don't have that. Energy is thermodynamics. That's science, right? That's energy cannot be created nor destroyed. There's energy, sure, but that's not who Christ is. That's a chemical makeup. That's science. The idea that when you look at any other religion, Jehovah's Witness, do you think they'd fall on a sword? Well, they tried it and they didn't. They ran away scared. Mormons, same way. And in fact, most times people convert. this elusive craziness that is ensuing today is an escape from the reality. I see it in posts, I see it on people's minds, I see it in Twitter. I see how much people hate Christ, and I don't understand why. But then you get into this idea that, well, maybe they hate Christ because they hate themselves. And that's not the way of Christ, right? And Jesus is not this person that is going to judge you. He's going to welcome you. And the only way I can ever explain this is that you have to take that walk yourself. My ministry has never been bringing somebody to Christ. I don't bridge a path to Christ. I don't even plant a mustard seed. I advise people to read. I advise people to read about the warriors of Christ. If you can't find the faith there, then maybe it's not for you. I'm not saying everybody needs to be Christian, and I'm not saying anybody that's not Christian goes to hell. I don't know what happens when we die. I just know that when people ask me to speak on Jesus, I don't speak on the carpenter's son. I speak on the men that fought for him. I speak on the men that came before me, that share my honor as Templar, and I am a Templar. I'm a 7th level, and not many people know that, but I wear the cross around my neck, and I never show it because those are special sacred relics. And when you read about those types of things and you understand the Templars, when you understand the Crusades, when you understand the kings that came before us. We live in St. Louis. Nobody knows that St. Louis was a crusader. He was a failed crusader. Okay? He understood, he lost both his brothers in that war. He understood that in order to take back Jerusalem, we have to go through Egypt. Well, his brother was very gung-ho, and they take the ports of Takata. They took it so easily that his brother said, I'm going to go on ahead. And St. Louis said, do not do that. Wait for me, brother. Wait for me. His brother was too ambitious, and he lost his way. And we see this, and we learn about it in the Bible too. Don't be overzealous, son. Wait for numbers. Numbers are always bigger. But he didn't, and he gets destroyed, and he gets captured. And then everything follows suit. And so St. Louis is a failure. He's actually the most failed crusader there was. He lost a lot of men under his watch, and so did John Umudati. John Umudati almost lost 25,000 Christians. When you look at the numbers of how many people died, it makes the Civil War look ridiculous. It makes Vietnam look ridiculous. It makes World War II look ridiculous. It looks like Hitler's regime killing 6.5 million Jews look ridiculous because crusades killed hundreds of millions of people. And there were so many of them that it got so sickening to Pope Innocent, Pope Urban, that they wanted to stop. Like, this is not working, man. We're just losing everyone. But within years, 2 to 3 years, they would gather 25,000 troops, 125,000 troops, 300,000 troops. And a lot of people don't know that the first crusades were fought by the rich. Oh, it's just the kings sending out the peasants to fight their wars. That's not true. Kings fought in the first battles. Popes fought in those battles. And you do that because of that thing about Christ. And then people are like, well, the crusades were violent. What isn't violent? You think nailing somebody to the cross is not violent? You think because Rome was so scared of Christ, they had to kill him? And then what would ensue next? But we see this humanity in Jesus. So I can't have this argument that Jesus is somebody else in one of these cultic religions, that he's an angel or something, because there's no way he could have withstood that. But Jesus himself says this. Mark is clear on it, that Jesus even doubted. He's like, hey, man, if you can pass this cup, that'd be great, dude. I kind of like life. I really kind of don't want to die tomorrow. But he knew what was going to happen. He knew that Judas was going to betray him. He knew that those things had to happen in order for it to fulfill the prophecy. And those prophecies were written by Isaiah and Jacob and Caleb and Nahash and Noah and Moses. And he knew that he was the line of David. He knew that. He knew he was the Messiah. And that's where, Amon Hillard gets twisted with Charles David Amon Hillard, because a lot of times people look up his name and they can't find him. His full name is Charles David Amon Hillard. This guy is completely out of his wits, because there is nothing in the Septuagint, in the Hebrew scriptures, in the Torah, that talk about Messiah meaning drug or anything to it. It means chosen one. It means the Messiah, the one that will come. And Jews had a hard time understanding who Jesus was. They expected it to be like the kings of old, like Solomon and David. They expected Christ to be a warrior, where he becomes this person that's kind of born and he goes away, and then all of a sudden he shows up, and within the span of a year, he's got all this following. Because people, they live on the word. And that's what a lot of Christians say all the time, is that, like, I'm fulfilled with the Spirit. It's because he was giving that to people. And lies have short legs. Okay. Greek mythology doesn't exist anymore. It's mythology. Christianity is not mythology. Lies wouldn't be around. And then when people say, oh my God, Jesus reminds me of Horace, because Horace has a similar story. He doesn't. In fact, it would have been impossible for people in Jerusalem at the time to read anything in Egypt because the words were scrambled. Nobody read those languages anymore. That would mean that Jesus would have to know of ancient Egypt writings in order to understand the story of Horace. So I don't buy that. I don't buy this idea that Jesus is just a reincarnation of the same story. It doesn't work that way. Do multiple religions have the flood story? Absolutely. Why is that? Well, always turn around and say, where was Jesus the first 30 years? He's not mentioned anywhere. But I guarantee you, if you follow the steps of what people and what philosophers and what science are saying now, is that a young Jesus was a traveler. A young Jesus was propheting in different countries. A young Jesus was talking in India, in Asia, in the Orient, around the globe. A young Jesus before he returns to Jerusalem, before he claims himself the Messiah. So that's why when you look at Hinduism, when you look at all these different spirits, they all have the story of the flood. So was Jesus really professing around the world before? We don't know. I have no evidence of that. It is total assumption. But it is interesting that that religion, for instance, leads the world. In America, it's still really heavy-handed religion is Christianity. And there's a lot of Christ followers along the world. So it's interesting that that word has reached everywhere. When science has tried to break that word of Christ, they can't. And they try to disprove Christ, they can't. They have Roman record of Jesus Christ. So, and that's the
What
thing.
would Jesus what would Jesus have what would Jesus have said about the Crusades? How do you think he would have felt with that many deaths
Yeah,
to
it's a
put
good
forth
question.
his name and his teachings?
Um, you have to understand that this is a battle of what they're fighting against. It's not so much what Jesus would say as far as I have men slaying other men. It's what they're doing to his temple. It's what they're doing to his faith and the faith basis. Most people don't understand, but when you look at the great Muhammad, okay, and this is not Muhammad the god. This is the great Muhammad was a warrior. He was a Saracen. And this was somebody that John Wadati was fought against and lost against, and then eventually defeated. He defeated him. And then John died 20 days later from his wounds. He was, I think, 57 years old. But John is this person that is going to come across one of the worst Muhammad in ever. Okay. This is a person that is going to enslave Christians. When we talk about slavery in America, it's awful. But it's ridiculous when you compare it to the numbers of how many Christians and Europeans were enslaved under Muslim rule. You're looking at a person that's 10% sub-Saharan African. You're looking at a person that was enslaved by Muslims. That's my line. That's my DNA. It's sub-Saharan African, which means my forefathers fought in those crusades and we were captured. Morocco. So when you would run those types of ideas, when you say, well, how would Jesus react to war? It's the same in anything. I don't think Jesus wants his church overrun with the wrong professing of it. I think there is time where you have violence. I think there is time where violence is very necessary. But there was always peace talks, even in the Crusades. There were times where Saracens said, we should break. We should have 3 years of peace. We should really think about this, because a lot of men were dying. When you look at the great Muhammad was a pedophile. Okay. He captured most of the Saracens were pedophiles. They looked for the children and they slept with the boys and they slept with the girls, these little children. That was something they did. And that's written on both sides of it, because in their sick-minded thought, that's okay because they're Gentiles. That's okay because when you claim a jihad, and we still do this today, the jihad is still on. It's raging. Okay. It's happening every day. There are Christians dying every day. 70,000 Christians died last week. No one's talking about it. We are still in the Crusades. We are still at this war. When you look at when these people are raped and molested and beheaded, and they're having sex with children, little boys, men, this is something that's happening today. Just read the stats on October 7th. This is what the Muslims do. Christians never did that. In fact, they were merciful. John Wadati was merciful. Most of the Crusaders were merciful. I think that's where they went wrong. I think they shouldn't have been. I think they should have pushed it back. Richard III is often blamed for that. Richard I is often blamed for that. It's because they were too merciful. Richard III could have taken Jerusalem, but he chose not to because he had such a friendship with the Saracen and the emir at the point where they just respected each other so much, because it's like football. It's a crazy statistic. You might be on the different end zone. When the Chiefs lost this year, they still respected the Philadelphia Eagles. It's like, man, you played really good, and that's kind of where that came from. But sometimes we lose sight. Were there crusaders that were wrong to do it? Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying that everybody that fought in the Crusades was just, we're doing it for Christ. In fact, that's the story of Vlad. That's where we get vampirism at. That's where we get our vampire stories at. And it's all miscombobulated. But this was a person that was a crusader that walked out onto the battlefield and would take on 30, 40 people by himself. The emirs, when they wrote this, they're scribes. Okay, when the Saracens wrote about Vlad, because John Wadati is the one that's going to start when you get into the Slavic nations. There's a bunch of Slavic crusaders that come out of this. And Vlad's story is so incredible, but this is a man that's going to suffer post-traumatic stress syndrome. This is the first real time we're going to see this. This is also something that happens with special forces units that can't ever leave and can never come back to society. So I think that there's a question of how you die versus what you're doing in order to die. If you're dying for Christ's sword, in most cases, then what did you die for? So I would always offer the opinion of what Jesus would think of 9/11 when we went back in and got Osama bin Laden. I would say that, what did you think about when we got back at them? When they took our towers down, killed 3,300 innocent people. I would ask you, what does Jesus and God think about when Muslims fly in and rape kids at a music festival that are arms? They are cowards. They have always been cowards. That's how they fight. They fight like cowards. And then the minute Israel stands up, you start to see what happens, because they have the wind of God. You're never, ever going to defeat Israel. You're just not. It doesn't work that way. So you can wave your Palestinian flag, you can do all the things that you want to do, but you have to understand that war has been raging since the 4th century. Okay, the Ottoman Empire is no bullshit. And the problem is, people don't understand how far this goes. You're never going to solve the peace in the Middle East. They both think that this is their territory and their land. When you say from the rivers to the sea, that is the most condescending thing you can say to a Jewish person. That's like calling a black person an N-word. That is the worst thing you can say to it. That is their land. That was given to them by God. Muhammad comes 630 years after Christ. That's not their land. And in fact, Israel was scattered forever until they finally made it back in. And that's when all the wars ensued, because they came back to the homeland. That was 1947. Israel's declared a state. So you have to understand that this has been raging on. This is how it works in the mindset. The Bible is war. The Bible is always talking about war. God doesn't point to a different picture to be peaceful and turn the other cheek. Those are parables that explain that a totally different thing. We're not talking, you don't tell a Muslim to turn the other cheek when he's got, guys helicoptering in and flying into a music festival. And it's absurd what our Ivy Leagues have done. Did you know that Harvard taught law out of the Bible when it started?
I think that's the big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think first of all, people have to start having some knowledge.
Yeah.
I think people need to start reading on their own. And I think people believe a lot of the bullshit that is out there and don't have the knowledge base to clarify. And Damien, I challenge Damien all the time when he comes on, and I'm so grateful for his viewership and his responses, because he lets me challenge him, and I appreciate that. Religions have to change to allow integration. Bullshit. That's man-made.
Correct.
That's the stuff that I say, what I call something man-made, that's what I dislike about religion.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
too
the
many
thing is,
times religion is teaching people
yeah, and the
it's
thing is,
teaching people the person who want it's I want this congregation to be integrated. I want to bring in everybody. Not
they,
everybody
he does have
needs
great questions, though.
you need to have an understanding of the Bible before you start changing things.
Yeah, and you have to have knowledge of Semitic
He
languages.
does. I love it.
Yeah, and so when he has great questions. Yeah, the Ark and the Covenant of Ethiopia. It's a very great story if people don't understand why the Ark would be in Ethiopia. It's because David and Solomon had many wives, and one of those wives was the Queen of Ethiopia, who was said to be very beautiful, beautiful beyond her years. And Ethiopia visited the king in Jerusalem, and there was a fight that ensued and stuff like that. And allegedly, she took one of the arks. There are 5 arks, and she took one of them. The basis of most of the religion, what actually keeps Enoch, first Enoch, is the Ethiopian religion. Now, most people do believe that they might have the ark based on I don't know if Damien knows this or not, but the church in Ethiopia, for some reason, the followers of that church die very young of cancer because something is radiating them. And some believe that they do have that ark. And some believe that that ark is enlightenment. And even in the Old Testament, when you read about the ark, people that opened it died. We see this in Indiana Jones, and it's a full meltdown. So there is some interesting ties to whether the ark is in Ethiopia. That's not really my field of study. My study is ontology. It's the origin of things. I do love Indiana Jones. I think it's what got me following Christ. I think that's one of the reasons why I love my religion so much, is because it is involved. It's done terrible things. It's done great things. I think that's because man is involved, right? But to your point, a lot of people say, well, there are very peaceful Muslims, and that's true. Most of them are in the West. They're here with us. But in New York City, they're trying to get Sharia law passed, and so much so that I saw an article today where there are Muslims dressing up like cops in cop cars that are basically telling people, Americans, not to do the things they do because it's against their religion, it's against Sharia law. And I will tell you one thing: Christians evolved. Muslims still live in the 13th century. They're still battling us. They're still fighting against St. Louis. They're still fighting against Richard III. They're still fighting against Vlad. Um, we haven't. We've evolved, and we make more minimized strikes. We have allies now. The thing, though, that what I'm starting to see in some circles is that people want a revisit of the Crusades. There are so many soldiers that I know that are friends of mine that wanted to fight with Israel, and Biden wouldn't let them because of that humanity. Our own Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of Defense, wears the Jerusalem
Mhm.
cross on his chest. The Jerusalem cross I also have. That is not a sign of racism or white supremacy. The Jerusalem cross is the cross of Godfrey. That is the first crusader. He's the one that cleanses Jerusalem, and he is the king of Jerusalem. We are it's most remembered. Baldwin is most remembered more than Godfrey, because Baldwin had leprosy and he was a great king, but he couldn't really fight. They made a movie, Kingdom of Heaven, which was completely bullshit. And really talked a story. The thing that they got right was this brotherhood between warriors, whether you were on the other side or not. They got that part right. Because they said Saladin, which is a guy that you hear a lot of. Saladin is a major, but he's not a warrior though. He's a scribe. He's the one that actually wrote it. And he writes the Muslim account of the Crusades. And so that's what I'm saying. Before people interject and say, I heard the Crusades were terrible, I heard it was violence, Jesus wouldn't want that. I would ask you to revisit that. And I would ask you to read both sides. And that's why Ibrahim's book is so important. Now, I will warn you, the book is the size of your laptop. It's about this big. It's an account of both sides, both the Christian side and the Muslim side, which is eyewitness testimony. So you're not just hearing one side of the crusade, you're hearing the other side. And you're going to see warriors that fail. You're going to see warriors of Christ. They're going to fail. They're going to fall to Muslim. They're going to fall to the Saracens. And you're going to see them come back and bounce back. You're going to see both sides wage war. When you get back into the Vlad story, which I think is fascinating because my wife is obsessed with vampires. We actually had a little debate last night, which I thought was kind of funny, but she was like, well, I don't know that I believe in all that, but I believe in vampires. And I said, well, and she goes, I think the vampires are like Constantine, right? So Keanu Reeves. And I'm like, well, now you're talking about angels. Now you're talking about, that's a little bit different, right? Angels don't have souls. Okay. And I think that other people have to understand, they have to understand the bloodline. Jesus Christ didn't die for your cat or dog. Jesus Christ didn't die for angels and Elohim. He didn't die for demons. He didn't die for angels. He didn't die for all the divine community, which could include Bigfoot, which could include fairies. We don't know. Could include leprechauns. We don't know who's all part of Elohim. We don't know. And that's why when people say, well, where are you at with cryptids? I don't know where I'm at with cryptids. I think that if you listen to a podcast, that now they are Calvinists. I'll let you know that. They are Calvinist preachers and they are incredible storytellers. Their podcast is called Haunted Cosmos. And they give you some beautiful ideology behind Bigfoot, behind fairies, behind these things that we love. Mothman, they even did one on Mothman. And I think it's a very fascinating podcast because you have two pastors here that are very religious. They do go after ghost hunters, and I have clapped back at them like, hey, dude, you don't have stories without us because you won't go in the building, but we will. So it's different. Like, but you know what I'm saying? So you don't really have a podcast without ghost hunters, man, dude. Like you don't have a
Gotta send
podcast.
somebody.
Right. You don't have a podcast without blondes and booze. Those are the chicks out there looking for Bigfoot and Dogman. All right. So you don't have, and he has a great podcast on Dogman. And a lot of it is people that have actually experienced these types of things. And where are they coming from? Where is the realm of the dead? Well, a lot of people don't talk about Lilith. Well, Lilith was ancient Sumeria when you get into Mesopotamia. We're talking the ontology of demons. Now, everybody wants to be fascinated with Ed and Lorraine Warren because of demonology. But demonology is invented. It's a made-up thing. It's not a real thing. You're talking about demon ontology, which means that you want to understand where actual demons come from. Well, you're not going to find that in the Bible because that's not when they take the Septuagint and they take the Hebrew, and I think that word is said differently because I've heard it said a different bunch of things. Well, basically what it is it's basically the original Bible. It's when all the scribes basically wrote about Moses and Noah, and they took it and they said to make it Greek, man, everybody can read it. And it would have been in Koine, which would have been Koeon, which is the ancient Greek, which is where Hillard goes wrong. If you guys know who Amon Hillard is, that's where he goes wrong, is that he's reading it from the Greek. He can't read it from the Greek, though. I know he's a classist and he understands language, but he's interpreted it instead of refining it. And there's so many scholars that have come out and said, man, the guy's a bright guy, but like, that's just wrong. Like Hebrew scholars have come out and said, no, dude, it literally says the chosen one. But he wants to get, I believe the man is possessed. He even looks like he's possessed, but you can be possessed in different ways to mostly.
Well, he comes on saying, "Hail Satan."
Exactly. He always says hail Satan, and he always does things like, Billy Carlton is another one that's really, really confusing people. He's not an intelligent person. He's an intellectual. And what is an intellectual? An intelligent person is very different from an intellectual. An intellectual is strong and an expert on a subject that they believe they are intellectual on. But the problem with Billy Carlton is half the time he's saying the words wrong and he has the math wrong. It's the same with Terrence Howard. But these people have platforms. Joe Rogan gives these people platforms, which is come of age. If you read the comments lately, I mean, Joe Rogan does great. I love Joe Rogan. I think he's an amazing person. I think he's awesome. I think he's funny. I've always loved Joe Rogan. I always will. But I do believe in this idea that he should push back on some stuff like, yo, dude, like that doesn't sound right. And when we don't push back, then we allow this to go into the ether. And then people are listening to Billy Carlton being like, oh, yeah, that could be true. It's not true. The math doesn't math, bro. Like, and there's other people, once again, that's not my expertise, but I can tell you, man, I don't think that works that way. What we're about to see, which I think is grand, getting a little bit, I got a little bit sidetracked there, but getting back to Vlad, I will let you guys know that this was a man that we don't understand where he learned how to fight, but this is the real first like mixed martial artist. Like this was a guy that carried blades and stars and pistols and cannons, and he was incredible on the battlefield, and so much so that he develops bloodthirst. And this is where the immortality comes from, that they sent up 40 against him and he just wiped them out. They just didn't understand. What do you mean? He's like, he's the only one on the battlefield. I don't know. He swarms. I've never seen anybody fight like this. You want to talk about Gotham, you want to talk about Batman, you want to talk about superheroes. That all comes from the Crusades. Okay. That's where all of the ontology of these things that we read today, the superhuman strength, the immortals, it all comes from the Crusades, because that was the written testimony of people that fought against these people. Like, this person ain't human, dude. There's just no way. Even men today, today we have guns, we have automatic machine guns, we have, saw guns. It would be impossible to go out into the middle of a field and take people out. But then again, in World War II, we have a story of a beautiful story of a medical doctor, basically a chaplain, and he goes out in the middle of the war zone and starts pulling bodies and helping these victims. He saved over 42 people with no weapons. How was he able to do that? So you have to ask yourself, is there divine interference there? Is something happening with Vlad when he's taking down basically the Ottoman Empire, which was no empire to be shy about? People don't talk about the Ottomans. They don't talk about how strong and powerful they were and how many men there were. The great Muhammad was Ottoman. So there's so much more to read, and there's so much more to understand before we look at a meme online and be like, oh yeah, I don't believe in Jesus. Or we look at something online and said, that must be the truth because I found it on the internet. And it's just, it doesn't work that way. It takes years and years. I haven't even gotten through all the material. I mean, if you look behind me, there are stacks and stacks of books. My wife goes into our bedroom and she looks at my nightstand, and I've got 17 different books. In one I'm reading about crucial conversations, right? That's the name of the book. In the other one, I'm reading about the unseen realm. In another one, I'm just reading my Bible. In the other one, I'm reading about cults. I'm reading about the Red Dragon. I'm reading about Demonology, which was his first book. That's King James's first book, right? So before he becomes the best king we've ever known in our lifetime, that was Catholic and Christian, who actually takes it upon himself to convert and write the New King James Version. He wrote a book before that, about 11 years before that. He wrote Demonology, where he faced off with the devil. He faced off with a demon because of his righteousness. Now, you would know him as he's James the First in England, but he is actually the sixth in Scotland. He's the sixth king of Scotland, but he's the first of England. And he's going to be the nephew of Queen Elizabeth, who was an incredible queen. She reigned for 40 years in total peace. And we don't read enough about her and how her decision-making skills were. This is where we first time see a woman leader that is incredible, but we don't take lessons from it. We look at it for Hollywood wants to romanticize that. No, man, don't romanticize that. Look at how she led men and women. Like, and so that's what happens when, and I would and encourage people, and people are like, I don't really like to read. And da-da-da. You'd be surprised if you're scrolling or on a doom scroll, how much you're actually reading. You'd be surprised how much you read every day that's completely nonsensical bullshit that does not going to resonate with you. And instead, you should pick up a book. And what I always advise people to do is go back to a bookstore and pick up a book and read the first couple chapters or read the first 5 pages. If you like his style of writing, I guarantee you can get into the book. I guarantee you can understand like where we're coming from. And it is hard, but if you want to start with religion and you want something fun to read, then read everything J.R.R. Tolkien ever read and everything C.S. Lewis ever wrote. If you read those two men, you will learn about Christ. You will learn about demons. You will learn about saints and angels. You will learn about all of it, because every interpretation of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, who were very close friends, was about the Bible. It was about getting people to Christ. And that's how they did it. They did it with their writing, where it wasn't boring and it didn't sound like Shakespeare, but it sounded something that you can identify with, that you can have relevance with. If you read their incredible stories, it's all about Christ. It's all about the Bible. And that's what we see in this, the burying of the deep. When Gandalf stands there and says, you shall not pass, because you're coming from a different realm. So there are so much we can see. If you don't want to read the history stuff, you can start with C.S. Lewis, who lived the same exact life as Sigmund Freud. The lives that it is the craziest when you start understanding. There's a book that's called C.S. Lewis and Sigmund Freud and Where is God? When you read a book like that, you understand someone that takes the path of Christ and someone that doesn't. And look at where their lives ended. Look at the person that basically lived his same exact life. They both were fought in wars. They both lost their mothers at young age. They both had nothing. They both didn't believe in anything. But then when C.S. Lewis is off to war, he loses his friend Patrick. When he loses his friend Patrick at this war, Patrick turns to him and he says, "If I should fall, brother, give this to my mother." And C.S. Lewis was there when his friend falls. He picks up the letter and he does exactly as his best friend told him to do. He never reads the letter until he gives it to the mother. And what happens? Patrick's mother adopts C.S. Lewis and she teaches him the way of Christ. And that's what changes his life forever. Where Sigmund Freud doesn't have that experience. He has a brutal father. And in Sigmund Freud, he's going to write some beautiful things and he's going to understand psychology. But then he's going to have a student by the name of Carl Jung that's going to challenge him and it's going to send him into madness. So much so that Sigmund Freud questions his own work and redacts everything. He has no faith. So if you understand these people that have come before us, that have written it, and you look at the path of the people that chose to follow Christ, the kingdoms were given to them. And you look at the people that chose to not, and to be inspired by themselves, to be narcissists, to be heathenists, to be sociopaths. That's a learned behavior. So that's what I would advise people. We don't start with the Bible with Jesus. Read the people that followed him. That's where you'll gain your faith. That's where you'll find him. Because stories of warriors are not found in looking in a museum at the sword that was fought, but looking at the tomb of the man that's in it. And if we do that, you will find your path to Jesus. You will find Christ. You will find him. It's crazy to think that, but I don't think you find him in the Bible. I think you have to understand the people that understood it more than we did, and people that fought for them, people that wrote for him, the people that died for him. When you read and you follow those people and you read their books, I guarantee you the Enlightenment period will be very short. And I'm not telling you it's an overnight process and you change everything and you become this, ravenous, rabid Christian, right? Where it's like, oh, everything I'm doing is wrong. Jesus doesn't want that from you. He made you. And that's why I tell people. When my friend came out to me, I think we talked about this last time, and he said that, he felt like he was a woman trapped in a man's body. He often feared that he would go to hell. She often felt that. And I told him, I said, I can't judge you. What you're doing, I think, is wrong, but I will support you. And I don't think that God will hate you. I think there's always salvation. There's always redemption in that. And getting back to that bloodline, which is this full circle thing, it's because we're all the line of Adam and Eve. There's no other way to phrase it. We didn't come from apes. The scientists proved that in the Genome Project. His name, Dr. Spencer Wells. You can read the book, Pandora's Seed. Once again, we don't read. We don't see the work that people are doing. If you spend months, take 3 months and pick 5 books and try to finish those books in 5 months, I guarantee you will have the up on everything. But that's not even Christian. But Spencer Wells, not even a religious man, set out to do the Genome Project and went around the world swabbing people. And his results were insane. He proved Adam and Eve. He proved it. He proved that Native Americans weren't native to America. He proved that Aboriginals believed they were the first people in Australia. They weren't. He proved that Columbus never made it to America. He was in San Salvador, never stepped foot on America. But what did the narrative say? Take down the Columbus statues. Why? He was never here. Columbus wasn't a tradesman for slaves. Columbus fought against the Caribs, who were eating the other tribes. So he enslaved the Caribs, where we get the word Caribbean. But once again, nobody reads. It's right there. We hear, 1492, he sailed the ocean blue. No, he actually sailed it 5 times and he made it back. He was one of the best navigators of all time. And Columbus wasn't Italian. He was half Italian. He actually helped Jews too escape during the Crusades. So the idea that we can summate everything and just have a finished statement because of a meme or something I read online is a scary thought for me. I am not the most intelligent person in the world, but I will not fight in an argument if I don't understand the person's side. You have to read the Muslim's account. You have to read the Christian's account. You have to read both sides of the story in order to get the full picture. We don't do that. Why? You want to know what Marxism is? Mainstream media. Eliminate God, control the narrative. So that's why people are so ill-informed. It's a sad world that we're living in. And I just wish the beauty, though, I did see recently that Barnes and Noble is opening up 60,000 new bookstores across the world because people are starting to read again. They hunger for the written word, the spirit in
I
the
thought they were
word.
closing them down.
Oh no, they were. They were filing bankruptcy in the mid 2000s. They're coming back. They're coming back like gangbusters because people are
That's
tired.
awesome. No, nothing better than a good book.
Yeah, and people are tired of being talked at. People are tired of listening to people. I mean, I don't think that's right. And I'll tell you one thing, like people say it's conscious, it's not. It's your Holy Spirit. It's your third ventricle. I do believe that. It's how God communicates with us, that pull inside our brain. And he tells us, you know what? Do you really believe that shit? Here's a book. You should read this guy. You should look into this. And if we listen to our conscious, if we listen to Jiminy Cricket, if we listen to that Holy Spirit that's inside, we might gain something from that. It's the same thing that when you see when we were at Arcadia, there were times where it's like, I don't know if we should be doing this. Let's give Bella like a 15-minute break, like let's just have her go 15 minutes because she's in something.
Mm-hmm.
She's in a memory thing. And we see that something's telling us like, hey, like get that kid out of there. It's a lot, and it's hard when you look at those types of things because
Yeah.
I think that when you have more of a living perspective of, well, God doesn't talk to me. Yeah, I told that to a priest one time. And he said, do you speak his language? And Father Jim Vitucci was the reason why I wanted to be a priest. And he was the funniest priest I ever. He goes, I go, well, I think I speak his. I go, what is his language? And he said, his language is love. So are you speaking from a place of love? So it's those people see, that's my experience. Father D, Father White, Father Jim Vitucci, Father Wren, Father Joe that I have now. It's those priests. That was my experience. And I've never had a bad experience. And unfortunately, Father Tony, just remembered him from All Saints. I had great priests. And it's unfortunate that some did not. And I hate that they didn't. I just saw a true crime where a priest committed a murder. And it was hard to watch. I watched Ryan White's film. I became really good acquaintances with Ryan White, The Keepers.
But like you said, you're going to find that in.
Yes. Yeah, you're going to find that. So
You're going to find that in every religion.
Oh,
And
100%.
to say and I do know a lot of people who are very anti-Catholic because of that. Dude, it's in the Mennonites. It's in the Amish. Heavy in the Amish. Heavy in the Amish. I know this 100%. Speak from an authority point of view. It's in every religion. It's not just in religion. It's in Boy Scouts. It's in Girl Scouts. It's in sports.
Yeah.
There's nothing
you can't fight
that
the
it
enemy.
is not in.
Yeah.
The corruptness comes with humans. It does not come with. Yeah.
You know what an insane statistic is?
And so, people question, and that's one reason I was so comfortable having you on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are
one of the reasons I was comfortable having you on is everybody challenges me and says, well, you're not. Yeah, these are your beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a disclaimer. So if you don't like his beliefs, turn the channel or listen up next week. We'll have somebody else on. That's fine.
Of course.
I felt it was really important to have you on and say this because people ask me all the time where I stand. And I'm very open about what I believe in, but I have to be asked directly. And people show their ignorance by saying things like, oh, you're Wiccan. I am not Wiccan. I have never been Wiccan. I have never belonged in a cult that I know of.
Yeah.
I have been a member of several different religions. Um, I have joined because I wanted the information. I have done things because I wanted the information. I have gone through multiple initiative ceremonies in various older, different country, different belief system, religions, and got the hell out very quickly because of the corruption and because of the cult-like behaviors,
Yeah.
which you can find any place
Any
with
place.
people of power.
Dude, if you get into the right music group, the people that follow that band, it's like, wow, dude, you guys like need to get a life, sometimes. And I just think that, we have there's a lot of odds against us, but there's also a lot of people with us. I think in the end, Christians will join Christians and we'll forget our petty differences. And there we will rise. And I see that one of the most beautiful statistics I read this year, and it warmed my heart, is the number one conversion in religion right now is Muslim to Christianity. And it's because of October 7th. People are starting to see that this ain't for me. And, when we listen to the story of Muslim, a lot of people don't understand that these guys weren't around when the Jews were fighting Egypt. Okay. These guys came after Christ, 600 years after Christ. And they had other beliefs and their beliefs were muddled. And Muhammad is an illiterate. He doesn't even know how to write. Um, so my friend often tells me, what's weird about that religion, Frankie? It's like, do you remember when Jesus was in the desert for 40 days and he was tempted by the demon and wanted him to come to his side and be like, yo, I'll give you the riches and crowns of the earth. We could rule this place together. Jesus never batted an eye, kept walking forward. But that same person showed up 600 years later. And that same person put Isa in the Quran, the most violent book I've ever read in my life. Literally telling people to condone rape, pedophilia, murder, straight jihadist on everyone. Sharia law, extreme Muslims, right? And then there's different sects of them. And it is a cruel religion. It's a religion that I really can't fathom, and there's so many more facts that I have to dig into it. But there is this interesting silence that comes between that when we hear people saying, "Oh, I've got Muslim friends. I do too. My best friend converted from Christianity to Muslim," and we have these conversations, and we're at odds with each other at some things, some points of contention. But I will tell you this: he lives here. He's in the West. And I guarantee if he lived anywhere else, he'd convert in a heartbeat. It's easy to be peaceful here. We have laws, we have government. You're not going to go far. But not to knock anybody's faith or religion. It's just for me that is not the way. Like they are the ones that are the brutalists today. And it seems that, and they're a dangerous enemy because they're not afraid to die. Anytime you have an enemy that's not afraid to die, you're going to be fighting that war for a very, very, very long time. So I think
Long
that,
time, yes.
yeah. So I think that when you get into, the religion, I always have people like, hey, like, cause some people go to church and they feel the spirit right away and they just become this, they want to share it with everybody. It's like, oh my God, I feel great. And people are like, whoa, dude, calm down. Last week, we were snorting coke off a stripper's tit. So it's like, you have these types of people as well, which I think is awesome, right? Because that's who Jesus hung out with, dude. Like, everybody's like, he tried to paint this picture of Jesus. I'm like, look at the people he was hanging around with, man. He was helping the ones that needed the help, man. But, he vibed with them because he did the things that they were doing. And that's what made them believe. And when you see that he converts these people, these prostitutes, these drug addicts, these thieves into great men that walk this beautiful life, that's not a bad person, man. And so I think that when you have the Serenity Prayer for Alcoholics Anonymous, there's an alcoholic in my family. I have several alcoholics actually in my family. In my wife's family, that quit cold turkey, didn't need prayers, didn't need God, didn't need nothing. He's been sober now since, I don't know, Bailey, since been 13. Didn't need any of it, right? But he's a good person and he understands his way, and he saw his family was more valuable than the drink he had in his hand. So I'm not saying that it's for everyone, right? I think that the problem with non-denominational, the problem with Baptist, the problem with Calvinist is it has to be their way. There is no altercation. They're nothing. It's that or nothing. And I think that when you give humans limitations, they're often like, "Ooh, I don't know about that, man." Like, you got to ease into this stuff. It's very heavy topics. I would avoid I would avoid books that hate on things, because a lot of the hate that it's coming from is internal perspective. It's what their view on it because of their experience. They are a product of their environment. And that's where that book is coming from. And it could be a very well written book. But Matt Taibbi wrote a great book on hate. It's an incredible book. Matt Taibbi is one of the best, and he's a Democrat. One of the best journalists that's out there. He's the one that discovered all the Twitter wars after Elon bought it. And Hate Culture is an incredible book that talks about the divide. It talks about Marxism. It talks about how media is like making people hate each other. And we have so much more in common than politics. We have so much more in common than religion. Although it is nice to be cut from the same cloth and you can vibe and talk Jesus and have Bible studies and interpret things. But at the same time, like, I think that we need to find that place in the sand where we can say, hey, like, this is who I am. This is who you are. I'm never ever going to be not pro-life. I'm always going to be pro-life. I always will. Kid changed my life, and I know it could change anyone's. But at the same time, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I don't think anybody should tell anybody what to do. Not a government official, not a woman, not a man, especially a man telling a woman what to do. So in some respect, people see me as pro-choice. In my own life, I'm pro-life because that's the life that I lead. And once again, I don't judge people. That is not for me to judge. It's not for anybody to judge. And that works both ways. I see right now that most people judge me because of my affiliations with the church. And I've said nothing to them. Like, we don't have confrontation. I've seen people in the paranormal here have gone completely crazy about like certain aspects of it. About, like, I don't want to mention his name because he has a great following and he's friends with, and he's defended my friends, and I love that aspect of him. But there are some things that he needs to read more. He's a good reader, and he does read because he's getting his stuff somewhere. But there are things that he says it's like, that's incorrect. They weren't around at that time period. Jinn, he mentions a lot about jinn. Jinn comes from the Quran. That's their demon. It's a mortal demon. It can be killed. It can be stopped. It's an interesting perspective on jinn. It's where we get genie in the bottle. It's where we get cursed objects. That's where jinn comes from. So genie in the bottle actually comes from the origin of jinn. It's the ontology of it. So what they do is they bottle the spirit, and they, like the Dybbuk's box. So Hebrew mysticism, Kabbalah, or Kabbalah, as we see in South Florida. Madonna actually was a big Hebrew mysticism Kabbalist. I don't think she is anymore. I mean, she changes every week, but she was for a long time following Hebrew mysticism, which can be dangerous because you're getting into the ontology of ancient Sumeria. It's very dangerous stuff, but it's where you learn that type of stuff. So if you're strong-minded and have a good strength in Christ, you can read those materials. I have books on my wall that I would advise nobody to read. And if you don't have a great mindset, if you don't have a faith in Christ, a very strong faith in Christ, don't read the Red Dragon. The reason why I read the Red Dragon is because I read a book called Return of the Dragon, which is a phenomenal book that talks about all these people now doing Reiki and ayahuasca and LSD, and they're talking to these serpent lords. And in most of these trips, and this is even Graham Hancock, a man that I very much respect. I don't like the fact that he does this stuff, but he's also an atheist. So although I don't condemn Graham Hancock, I think he's a brilliant man. I love his documentaries because he's opening our eyes to civilizations that were here before, which is really helping me fight with Calvinists. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I don't think we're 7,000 years old. And I don't think we rode on the back of brontosauruses. I do believe in God. But God did create animals first. So that makes sense that why the dinosaurs came before us. But anyway, let's not go there. So there's a level of genius that comes within just reading and finding the books in the scripture. And then once you're hooked, like you're just like, all right, what else can I read about? I'm reading a book called Demons right now, which is a great book because it's not going into the like the 72 Lesser Keys of Solomon, which is fun, but it's it's written in the Romance period. It's not written. um Be careful with that one though. You want to read Return of the Dragon first, and then when you read the Red Dragon, it'll make more sense. But essentially, the Red Dragon comes
Yeah.
out mid 1500s. This is the same time that King James is going to write Demonology. This is the same time that people have unlocked the Lesser Keys of Solomon. That's why Red Dragon is written. It teaches you how to summon demons and angels and control them based on Psalm 82 and the Elohim, and the fact that humans are basically, it's their domain, which means we can control angels, we can control demons. And a lot of people believe this is how Solomon was able to build the walls and be such a great king and warlord. Also lived to be 1,000 years old or whatever the hell it was. But you have to be careful with those books because it'll tell you in that book to kill children. That's the problem with those books. Is like people are like, oh shit, we can summon a demon if we get the blood of an innocent. What the fuck does that mean? So you got to be careful when you're reading those types of books. You have to take it in stride. When you read Return of the Dragon, you understand what he's talking about. And then when you read Red Dragon, it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. Because we're going to need this type of substance to get to a next level. And that's where Amon Hillard gets a lot of his stuff, with this idea of drug usage and then being able to prophetize. And that's just not true. That's just not true. Although ancient drug usage was definitely done in those time periods, it wasn't something that it would have been something that would have been written about. Like, oh yeah, the guy's a drug addict. Like somebody would have written that down somewhere. Rome would have used that against Jesus, and they never did in the record. That's the problem with Amon, is that Jesus couldn't have done those things. He was always surrounded by people. He was always around people. Had he had done those things to get to that higher learning, Romans would have used it. The Jews would have used it. And I won't even say the Jews. I would say the Pharisees, the high priests, the people that wanted to control everything, the one that were making the temple a marketplace. Those were the ones that hated Jesus because they were losing income. And so they basically battled against him. So we have to be careful when we talk about those types of things. I don't know if you have any questions or anything, or I don't even know what time it is. I'm rambling here, but
Well, and according to him, all of the apostles were children. And that
uh-huh.
when they did arrest him, that was the whole storyline was, I'm not a child trafficker. I am not a,
Yeah.
which is a whole different storyline historically than anything that has ever been written. He
Yeah.
created a lot
And
there.
so Mark is the closest thing to Christ's death. I think Mark is written in 90 years after the death of Christ. It's the closest one. That's why a lot of pastors, a lot of priests love the book of Mark. John, Luke, they all kind of resemble. They're a little longer. They get more into storylines. Mark, I think, is the lion. He is basically this. It's just it's the Christ story. It's a very short story. But then we have other books that support that, right? Like people said, well, God doesn't talk to us anymore. We'll read Job because he did, and he doesn't need to talk again. And when you read Job, it's the first account of where we see Elohim, demonic Elohim, having conversations with God. And they're allowed to do this. And this is what really debunks these demonologists, these people that say demons are in basements of asylums. It debunks that because like they have free roaming conversations. It's not like God shut him off. Like, I'm not going to talk to that guy again. He's an asshole. Like, or send him a text message. Like they can communicate anytime they want. Job is clear on that. And Job was actually an Oriental chieftain. So he was actually Asian. He was of Asian descent. And so there's a beautiful book of Job. And it's a crazy book. It's sad, but at the same time, a lot of people don't like it because wow, look at God and the Elohim playing with a human, and they don't value the life that we have. They're immortals, so they don't understand, right? which means that there is no salvation in Christ. Christ meant nothing to the demons. Christ meant nothing. Angels, it didn't affect them either way. Of course, they loved Jesus, but that wasn't for them. That was for humanity. And so you can there's so many roads that you can travel down, and so many topics, and so many thousands of things that I read every day. But there are times where I need to take a break and I just read The Hobbit.
Dragon Ball Z.
Dragon Ball Z. Yep, totally.
When the War of the Worlds came and hell and it down to in the big dome.
Yeah.
Thing, and they're like, you're killing everybody, and one that says, what do I care? This is not of my being. This is not of my, I don't care. This is all a game.
Yeah.
It's, very much people don't understand that the conversations are allowed, and not necessarily through our iPhones, but
Yep.
Text your demon. I mean, there might be an app, Text Your Demon.
Yeah, the horns of Jericho. That's a crazy story too. The fall of the Solomon's Temple. It's
Yes.
There is somebody that has emerged on the scene in the Middle East that has claimed that his father's side was of the Muslim faith and his mother's side was of the line of Judah, and that he is to be the one, that he is actually he's prophetizing that he is the line of Christ, that and some people are labeling him the Antichrist. He's a very scary speaker. I've listened to a couple things that he has to say. He's a very, very dark individual and very powerful, incredible speaker. I don't know if I give any weight to it, but when he talks, he knows his shit. He knows his shit, and it's scary. I didn't share it because I didn't want it to get out to anybody, because I'm very wary of this guy. I won't even mention his name, but he's out there. And watching the Pope die, watching the stuff that's happening in Israel, seeing this person emerge, watching the trade war ensue, we are living in a very interesting time. I never say we're living in the end times because, the Bible's pretty clear. You're not going to know, but they do give you hints, like birth pains, like the earth's birth pains. We've got all these fires, these tornadoes, these earthquakes. I don't know. It's a creepy time to be alive.
Well, thank you so much. We're not going to go quite as late as last time. But thank you for being on, and thank you for this amazing discussion.
Absolutely.
Informative.
Yeah, and it's my belief, and
as
I'm not
always.
asking anyone to.
I think to make to decide on your own opinion or an opinion, you have to have knowledge. I mean, you can go blind into something, but it's better to have a knowledge base from different ideas and different things, and letting them present and share. It's to hopefully ask questions that they want to ask and start that conversation. Because, like you said, it would be nice if everybody could come together.
Yeah.
And to come together, you have to have an understanding, and you have to be willing to hear another side of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're not wrong. I think that we learn more from debate in a way where it's not personal. We can always walk away friends and disagree.
Yes.
And I think that's the message that we need to send today, And it's a message that I'm starting to listen to as well, because I've done that and I've been that person. Like I said, I'm not perfect. But I'm trying to really see where people come from and try to help them based on the questions they're asking. But yeah, if we can do that, that's great. And Damien, please follow us on Haunted Souls Paranormal and reach out to me and I will friend you. My Facebook's blocked because I actually do work in a government sector, so I'm very picky on who my friends are. But I would love to talk to you more. I have been reading some of your comments here, and I do love the Horns of Jericho. I think is a story that I
Yeah.
don't know if Julie's ever going to have you on. That's something you should talk about because that's a crazy story. And I think people would really love. We need to start, and I think I'm starting a podcast called Courageous Conversations. I talked to you about this, and that's what the podcast is about. It's about biblical stories and everyday people on the podcast having a courageous conversation with them. Here's a guy that thought he was a woman, and he's now a woman, and just having these courageous conversations with people is important because it gives people a little bit of enlightenment. I don't want to see people harm anyone. I don't want to see gay hate. I don't want to see trans hate. I don't want to see any of that. Whether I agree with that or not doesn't mean anything. But I don't want to see people being hurt or beaten to death or killed over who they are. I think that's awful. And I think if we have these courageous conversations, people can understand people a little bit more. They might not agree with them, but at least you know where they're coming from, man. Like that's just what they feel. So, yeah, is government and all that. You can get into those stories. I don't want to do politics. I don't care about who's writing a bill for what, blocking what. If you're still going to have these people, it's still a free country. So you should learn to live with them, right? And I think that's the beauty of it all.
Yeah, hate. I don't tolerate hate. We shouldn't hate. Well, as those of you that follow me on Facebook know, there is one population of people that I truly do hate, and I just can't get past that. I'm sorry. I have no desire to get past that. Um, it's predators of children. I'm just going to put it that way. So I don't
You
get
get
banned on
crazy, man.
YouTube or
You
Facebook
get
or any of
so
those
many,
things. But
you get so
I
many,
will go after them every chance I get.
yeah, you get so many creepy people messaging you. It's just,
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
yeah,
and I can post as many times as I want. Do not call me, do not contact me, do not send me pictures. I do not want pictures of you in any shape or form. I don't care what part of your body it is. Don't send me a pic of you. I
yeah,
am not single. I am very happily married. I'm not going to send you money. I will not allow you to read me. There are certain things. Somebody tried that the other day and they were fiercely blocked and reported, and there was like a whole lot of stuff going on there.
yeah,
Because it started out, "I'm gonna read you because I've got a message for you," and then it became, extortion, and then it became this whole thing, and that blew up really fast for them. A lot of accounts were shut down for them.
yeah, absolutely,
So,
and
but
insane.
but yes, thank you so and Frankie, I'm sure has even more than that.
Yeah,
People are crazy. There are
yeah,
some crazies out there, and I mean that in the most gentle way. I'm not talking about
yep,
people with mental illness. I'm talking about there's just some fuckers out there that just
yeah. Like what?
Thank you, Frankie, for being on. Thank you for entertaining the discussion. Everybody who hung in there with it, thank you
Yes.
so, so much. We appreciate you. As always, we'll have you on again. He's gonna just be a regular. You just like have him in here
Yeah, I love the
and
Sunday conversation. It's great.
have him talk things. I love you.
Okay.
We appreciate you guys. Thank you, Damien, for making the conversation great as always, because you're very interesting. Love you guys. See you next Friday night. Thank you, Frankie. Get some sleep.
Will do. Thank you so much, Julie.
Appreciate y'all.
God bless.
Good night.